Hi, I'm Tom Mihok, and welcome to my personal finance course. I'm so excited to have you here. There's so much I want to tell you about personal finance, and to kick off this first chapter in what is a complete list, a complete group of my video lectures, I guess you'd call them, about my personal finance course. I've taught personal finance now this is my 10th year, and I've taught it as much as 4 times in 1 year, 4 full 3-credit courses. It started out with just one with 25 students, and it grew in the years when I had several years of 55 students in each class. And I also teach it online. I teach it to grad students and undergrad students. And the face-to-face course, the full semester, is usually 3 credits. And the online course I do, this same course is broken up into 4 segments, and you earn 1 credit each for a total of 4 credits for the whole course. If you're coming to these videos through one of my courses, welcome. I'm glad you decided to take the course. I've come to really enjoy this material and love teaching it. And so welcome. If you've come from elsewhere, found out about it, or saw it on the web or YouTube, welcome. Enjoy watching these video lectures of my personal finance course. Now, the real course has a lot more in it. It has quizzes and discussions and participation and projects and group presentations and work that we do to illuminate more this information. But you'll learn a lot just by watching these videos. Now, the thing about personal finance is, compared to other things, when I'm teaching this, I always tell students that, if you take a course in, forgive me, but in fixed income or economics or accounting, and you don't work in that field, or you grow past, you work for a few years and you grow past that field, you never use it again, you won't draw back on the information that you learned when you learned this material the first time. But personal finance you'll use your entire life. So if you're a young person coming to this information, you'll add to it, you'll build a foundation with what we're doing here, and then you'll add to it the rest of your life through blogs and podcasts and social media and discussions and magazines and newspapers and other reading. If you're older and you're coming to this material, maybe you learn a lot that you don't already know, or maybe you'll learn more about things you know a little bit about. So there's great benefit. And even if you come to this material as an older person, you'll still be using it the rest of your life. So personal finance has great applicability in all of our lives, and great usefulness. And the more you learn, the better decisions you'll make, and the more financial security and financial success you'll have. So welcome. Thanks for watching. So what is personal finance? I usually kick this off, we have a discussion, right? So I ask you, what is personal finance? Well, finance is a practical field concerned with money used to purchase things and services, cash flow, like the economic operation of an entity or a corporation, markets where goods and services are bought and sold, capital, money held in support of or invested in entities or corporations, risk, uncertainty of outcomes. We're going to talk about risk in this course in terms of insurance and the uncertainty of outcomes. Investment, money into things to provide future funds for consumption or into assets to improve an entity or organization. Investment. And compare this. Finance, I see, is in between accounting and economics. Accounting is the counting of financial operations, the keeping score. Now, I don't mean to minimize accounting's value. It's important. And part of what's important is it has to be done in a way that all the counting is done equally, so you can look at one company and another company and make sure you're learning this, make sure you're seeing them on an apples to apples basis. But accounting is really the keeping score of the financial operations of an entity. Economics is the theory. What happens if we raise taxes or lower taxes? Or what if people buy more or buy less? What if we put it in a different country versus this country? So economics is, I think, on one side, accounting is on the other, and finance is right in the middle. This is finance. It's personal, right? It deals with people, their lives, their current and future financial stability and success. It deals with households, which is comprised of people. Mom, dad, children, husband, wife, 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 grandparents, and then generations. The current generation, you, right? Older generations, your parents, younger generations, your children, for example. So personal financial planning, which is the process of helping individuals or families or groups or organizations plan for their personal finances, is the process of managing your money to achieve personal economic satisfaction. And it should really include these four categories of decision making: savings and consumption, investments, financing, borrowing, and risk management. And we're going to talk about all these later in this chapter to let you know what's in this course. I also kick off the course with this chart. This is, as you can tell, it's hand drawn. I photoed this outside and copied it into the slides. And so this is not an actual economic outcome. It's meant to be, it's a little exaggerated, but it's meant to prove a point. And I say to students, which of these do you want? The A, the B, or the C security? Students raise their hands and they say, well, I like C. I say, why do you like C? Well, it's worth the most over time. Okay. Someone else raised their hand. I like A. Why do you like A? Well, because it's safe and secure and it's slow and steady. And then invariably somebody else raised their hand and they go, well, I like B because it's in between both. And of course, each of these has their place, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But the key is if you look at C, C is great for the future. C is great for the future, but what about for the short term? What about if you need your money for graduate school, money for a new baby, money for a car, and you've invested all in C, and in the short term, we can see its value is the lowest, its return is the lowest in the short term. It's also the lowest in the midterm. Now, again, this is an exaggeration, but it's for a purpose, which is to say C is great for the long term, but not so great for the short or the midterm, interim periods. B's not so bad. And this movement, you know, we talk a lot more about this in the chapter on investments, but we call this volatility. It's variability of the return or the outcome. Volatility. A has really no volatility. B has some, and C has great volatility. Now, how does this impact us? How do we decide which of these is really best for us? Well, one thing we look at are the life stages in personal finance. Young people have typically low income, few expenses, probably the responsibility for one person, yourself, right? Middle years, increasing income, increasing expenses, responsibility probably for more people, maybe yourself, a spouse, maybe children, maybe parents. And focus in that stage is on accumulating assets. Later years, you're trying to pay off your debts or extinguish them. These should be your peak earning years. They might not be, but they could be for most people. Preparing for retirement, possibly your highest expenses. Maybe you have then children in college, or you're living maybe a more expensive lifestyle, or you've accumulated things over time. And I'm not advocating or not advocating those things at this stage. I'm just saying this could be happening. And you could still be accumulating assets. And then your latest years, earning and expenses likely decreasing. Focus on income rather than accumulation of assets. By then, hopefully, you've accumulated assets and you're living off of those assets in these latest years. And the depletion of those assets to generate the income. And you may have to draw from principal at that stage and pull from your savings. Retirement, we talk about in a later chapter, is very different today than it was, say, in my grandparents' time and probably even in my parents' time. Retirement these days, people work longer, they live longer. They may, you know what I tell students always, in my retirement, what I want is I want to work less and make more money. I'm not sure I want to necessarily stop working completely, but I definitely want to make more money and work less and have more freedom and more flexibility. That's what I'm trying to do in my latest years. So investing time frames are key. When you go back and think about the A, the B, and the C securities, right? Immediate. If your needs are immediate, you need to think in terms of cash savings. An emergency fund, which is what you put together to provide 3 or 6 or 9 months of expenses. And we'll talk about this in a future chapter. This is for money needed now or within about a year. Wedding, grad school, law school, new child being born. You can take no risk with these investments. Short-term needs for like a wedding or grad school, tuition for children's school, which is a couple years away, down payment on a home, 3, 4, 5 years away. You can take very little risk, some, but very little, and you would want to avoid volatility. The medium term, college for children, maybe that's 18 years away, 15 years away, depending on the age of your children. Maybe buying a second home. Maybe you can assume some moderate risk in exchange for higher return possibilities and accept some volatility, but you don't want to accept a lot. And last, long term. This is for retirement and later in life. This is where you can choose the C security. If it goes down in the short and down in the mid, but it does well for the long term, that's okay. You can take the maximum risk because time allows investments to recover. In the United States, the market generally goes up. Not every year, sometimes not even in 10 years, but it generally goes up over time. 10 years in 08 and 09 during the financial crisis, we saw some years when for 10-year periods it was flat, and that was very unusual. Usually the US market is healthy and it goes up over time, but it goes up and down. Some years are bad, 2, 3 years are bad. And so you need long time frames, and retirement and later life are examples of these longer time frames. Here's an example of the financial planning process. This is from the Kapoor text titled Personal Finance. It has 6 stages. First, determining your current financial situation. 2, developing your financial goals. 3, identifying alternative courses of action. 4, evaluate those alternatives. 5, create and implement. And 6, review and revise. All these are important stages. Some, I argue, are a little bit more important than others, and we're going to talk about that in a second. So the first, your current situation. Gather your data, assess your situation, and determine your issues. Determine your income, your expenses, assets, savings, your debt, your net worth. And we'll talk about all these in future chapters. If these are new terms to you, don't worry. We'll talk about them. Build a personal cash flow statement and a balance sheet. We're going to do that in the next chapter. Examine your risk management. Risk is a chance of a loss. Loss being an outcome lower than expected. A death, disability, a health problem. Look at your health, time frame, your comfort with risk. These things are all impacts, all have impact on your current situation. Now let's look at the problem scope. What are we analyzing? Are we thinking about our retirement? Are we thinking about a financial plan for life in general that we're going to update regularly? Are we thinking about saving for a wedding, saving for college for kids? These are all different. And each one of these require their own analysis. And this is the end of the first segment. There's going to be a second segment in this chapter. Stay tuned for that. End of the first segment of the Introduction to Personal Finance.